And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation. Talk radio for the thinking person, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
We know that Obama is a construct, almost a digital president, in the fact that nothing real about him is ever seen. He has perhaps 500 PR agents around him. He has the entire media around him. We don't even know who he really is. We've never seen his college transcripts. We have a suspicion that he's a complete fraud. We know he's out to dismantle the United States of America from the military down. We know this. Everyone knows this who studied him. And yet we see a sweet man turning gray before our eyes who is going to usher in a new president soon, leaving this esteemed office in very good shape, according to Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and the other quislings in the media. But I have a story for you that should alarm you if you really care about America. And it will tell you that I don't care who becomes the president in January, whether it's Trump or Hillary or someone else. Humpty Dumpty has broken the military from the top down. And he's broken the military egg to such an extent that I don't know how anyone can repair our broken fighting capabilities. And I'm going to show you the media coverage of this story. On the left, the far left, the distorted left, the twisted left, the America-hating left, you have Yahoo News run by the sick haters of American exceptionalism. And their headline is, U.S. General Lori Robinson to become first woman to lead combatant command. So I said, okay, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing. I know there's some women who are great pilots. But something smelled about this story. And what smelled was it's about a diversity pick. It's affirmative action. Obama has picked a fraud to head the Air Force in the Pacific, because the real headline was written by Rowan Scarborough of the Washington Times. Obama has picked a nun pilot to head the Air Force in the Pacific, but she's a woman. She'll be the first nun pilot to command air power in such a large theater of operation. Now, why would he do this? Well, you read the analysis of her from all of the left-wing news coverage, and you hear this: General Robinson is a career pilot. She has 800 hours in the air. Well, I have more than 800 hours in the air, and I don't fly a plane. She never flew a plane. This is a Potemkin appointment. And listen to what Ashton Carter said, that fraud defense secretary, at an event hosted by the communist Politico. That shows yet another thing, which is that we have coming along now a lot of female officers who are exceptionally strong. And Lori certainly fits into that category. You know, if ever there were war crimes trials after this is over, Ashton Carter should be at the top of the list, along with the two previous defense secretaries who have gutted our military. How is it possible that there's no outcry when this nun pilot is being appointed by the Humpty Dumpty of our time to command air power in such a large theater of operation? Do you know that Lori Robinson, who has been nominated for promotion of 4-star general, has to be approved by the U.S. Senate in a confirmation? Do you know that? Do you know what's going to go on during that hearing when you have men of the stripe who gave us for the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and is about to give us this other extremist that Obama's trotting around as a moderate? I told you the other day there's no such thing as a moderate liberal. Liberalism itself is an extremist philosophy. But I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forwards. This is like making someone chief of surgery who has never performed surgery, but they've sat in a back room with a video camera watching surgeons perform surgery, and I'm making her chief of surgery and saying she has 800 hours in the surgical room because she watched it on television. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you know what this does to combat pilots who have to fight not only for their life, but also for the life of America? Do you know what this does to them to pick a fraud like this? Okay, no one cares about that because I didn't say Cruz, and I didn't say Trump, and I didn't say the magic words. Like, plunk the magic plunker, Froggy. I didn't plunk the magic plunker for the talk radio dolts out there and say the word Cruz or Trump. True. Cruz, Trump, election, Cruz, Trump, Cruz, Trump. Now then you get your callers. But this they didn't hear anywhere else yet, so they can't relate to it. So I'll keep going. This is astounding. I'm not going to ask you what you think of it because I don't care. I know what I care about, and I know I care about American national security, and I also know this woman is not fit for this command. She is a strict affirmative action appointment from top to bottom, like everyone else that Obama has picked. Incompetence from the top to the bottom. How in the heck could anyone ever fix this? You know, when I started in radio in 1994, I said that if this liberal destruction of America continues, this country will become like Portugal. And I remember the local newspapers jumped up on that. They laughed at me. They said, "Oh, Michael Savage, radical right-wing host, says America military become like Portugal, unable to fight war." Yeah, well, we become like Portugal under Humpty Dumpty Obama. A non-pilot to head the Air Force in the Pacific? Astounding. General Robinson is not a career pilot. Her military profession is air battle manager. She has served aboard the Air Force's surveillance aircraft, the E-3 AWACS and EAJ stars. But she's never flown a plane. In the Pacific, she's replacing a real general, a combat general, Herbert Carlisle, a career F-15 pilot, who has been bounced out to run Air Combat Command at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. But she's a career battle manager, and that's the important thing. That's like hiring what are the people at airports who control the planes that land? What do they call them? I forget what they call them. Yeah, air traffic. That's like appointing an air traffic controller to fly a 747. Or worse yet, to command the 747 fleet. And she's never flown one, but she's seen them land. And she's helped land them. Don't call me on this. There's nothing you could say. There's so much other stuff. I'd rather just play rock and roll. I'm agitated. It should bother you, but it doesn't. It's Rock and Roll Friday. It's Open Mic to Mike Friday. All of the week in review stuff you can call about. Monday, the radicals on the left, we learned, are funded by George Soros because he wants to destroy America. If there was a war crimes trial, he'd be on the top of the list, along with the defense secretaries who've destroyed our military. I don't know what you try George Soros for. Probably a number of different crimes against humanity. He's leading the left-wing stormtroopers against our elections. He wants the radicals, the vermin who burnt down Ferguson, which he funded. Yes, he funded them. Soros, the evil, evil money changer in the temple. We were warned about George Soros in the Bible. Jesus warned us about the money changers in the temple. There he is, George Soros, money changer in the temple. This temple of democracy, we have a money changer in the temple. He's in the back, cackling away as he trades currencies. And while trading currencies undermines the greatest nation on earth. Well, on Wednesday, I said that Obama's playing a game with us. He's not picking a moderate liberal. There's no such thing as a moderate liberal. Because I talked to you about the fact that liberalism itself is a radical philosophy whose aim is to slowly or rapidly erode the structural pillars of a traditional society. And I gave an example of another one who, with PR agents, Governor Jerry Brown, a lifetime leftist who has destroyed our borders in California. He got elected because of the illegal aliens, mainly from Mexico, in the unions, the SEIU. He overrode the voters, just like all of the other demagogues in America. Now, that would be bad enough. But a highway patrolman was killed the other day on duty up in the Sierra Nevada mountains during a snowstorm. A car skidded out of control and killed him, crushed him to death. He died in the arms of his fellow officers. And, they asked for a procession, a funeral procession. And the CHP, California Highway Patrol, was denied this by Governor left-wing fanatic Jerry Brown. How can any cop listening to this show ever vote for a Democrat? Don't you know they hate you? Now, I know why you do. Because you're afraid Republicans will tighten the budget and take in your pensions. That's a rational fear. I understand that. But would you rather put your life and your safety above your bank account? Because that's what's happening. Democrats hate you. Make no mistake about it. Democrats from the top to the bottom are like this General Laurie Robinson. They hate you. Any cop who votes a Democrat is voting his own demise. So I got an email, an anonymous email today, about the procession of the CHP officer denied by Governor Jerry left-wing fanatic Moonbeam Brown. But you see, you wouldn't know that. He's been posed as a man who's a moderate, and he's not really a fanatic. Jerry Brown is one of the most fanatical liberals in the United States of America. But because the media is owned by him, or they're one and the same, whichever way you want to put it, you have no idea what he's doing to the state any more than you know what Obama's doing to the nation. I got this email anonymously. Thank you again. In an act of solidarity, police officers from around the state of Nevada chose to support the fallen officer on the escort of his body from Reno Medical Examiner's office to Roseville, California, where he's being buried. What was supposed to be no more than 2 cars turned out to be hundreds of cars. I've heard inquiries as far away as the high-ranking members of the New York State Police and NYPD about the rumor that Jerry Brown has denied this procession. Apparently, Governor Brown's office refuses to acknowledge or confirm the initial statement. Either way, Michael Savage, your comments on air have helped bring a sense of pride to law enforcement across the United States. I don't know if Governor Brown will take the time out to speak at the funeral, but we'll have to see. Michael Savage just noted law enforcement across the country values the show and reacts appropriately. Thank you, sir, for this anonymous note. There's nothing I can say about it other than I just said it. It's a hard time to live if you really see. You know, it's easy to live if you're not focused. If you're just a drug addict like Hollywood stars are, if you're constantly stoned, constantly drunk, if you're just running after pleasure every second, Leo DiCaprio, love it. Wins an Academy Award, and the fraud gets up there like Obama, and the first thing he says is, global warming is real, and we got to save the planet. And Leon DiCaprio then runs off to his jet and flies to some party on his yacht. I'm nothing against private jets or private yachts. He earned it. That's not the point. It's the hypocrisy, my friends. The liars, they've destroyed the world. It's bad enough they produce movies that are filled with sex, drugs, rock and roll, and violence. I get that. It's very entertaining. It's quite corrosive, though, at the end of the day. But I'm not here to act as a kind of inquisitor and censor of the artistes in our nation. I'm here to talk about the realities of our nation. When you have Obama, as I said at the beginning of this monologue today, this Friday, taking a woman who's never flown a jet in combat and calling her a general to begin with, and now taking this fraud who's really just a glorified air traffic controller, and he's putting her in charge of the Air Force in the Pacific. It's beyond comprehension that this is going on in front of our eyes, and no one in the media talks about it, except Rowan Scarborough of the Washington Times. We have a fraud as a president. Now we have a fake general who's pushing a fake moderate Supreme Court nominee upon us. Humpty Dumpty has broken America. And that's the story to begin with. Now, here's another one to show you where it's all coming from. This is a shocker. The American College of Pediatricians issued a position statement last month entitled, quote, Gender Ideology Harms Children. So I don't know which side they were on. I didn't know, because pediatricians today are very, very left-wing. And I was trying to figure out, what are they talking about? Gender ideology harms children. Well, here it is. I was shocked. I'll read it to you when I get back. On gender insanity in the United States of America and how it's destroying our children's minds, hearts, and souls. Back in a minute.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Your Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust for tangible assets, gold and silver. Call 800-BUICO. You know, overweight, punchy in a nightclub in Miami with my name on the door. That was a great movie. What was that movie? Great movie. Raging Bull, in the end, when he plays Jake LaMotta running a nightclub in Miami. And he's telling terrible jokes, spilling drinks on county commissioners, getting thrown in a clink. This is the problem. You don't know how you're going to end up. You think you're doing well in your life. You keep yourself straight and narrow your whole life. And at the end, like the religious books say, a man makes one mistake toward the end of his life and he ruins his whole life. Huh. Yeah, a lot of truth in that one. Oh, so let me get back to the story. American College of Pediatricians. Gender ideology harms children. So I didn't know what they were talking about because, you know, when you hear pediatrician, for years now, they've been very left-wing and fanatic and so liberally inclined that you don't know what they're going to say. Well, here's what they said. And it's good news. This is good news. The American College of Pediatricians urges educators and legislators to reject all policies that condition children to accept as normal a life of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex, close quote. It's so real, it's so clear, I didn't know that they wrote it. I had to deconstruct what they wrote to say, did they really write it? Because it's too clear. The statement issued on Feb 2 stated, quote, facts, not ideology, determine reality. Wow. The statement written by Dr. Michelle A. Cretella, president of the American College of Pediatricians, Dr. Quentin Van Meter, VP of the American College of Pediatricians, and a pediatric endocrinologist, and Dr. Paul McHugh, University Distinguished Service Professor of Psych at Johns Hopkins, cites 8 reasons why, quote, gender ideology, instead of treatment based on biological facts, is harmful to children. The first point is human sexuality is an objective biological binary trait. X, Y, and XX are genetic markers of health, not genetic markers of a disorder, with the purpose of male and female being the reproduction and flourishing of our species. How can they be so sane? What happened? Did the American College of Pediatricians suddenly find a brain?
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7287.
Detaining a small crowd of 30 people. They love you anyway. What's the difference where you get your love from? Now, here's a story. I'm going to read you headlines for a while on the Savage Nation on Rock and Roll Friday. I mean, call on any topic you want. Don't get hung up on what I'm hung up on. Whatever's on your mind and whatever the pebble in the shoe is. And that kind of stuff. Here's a couple of stories about Hillary on michaelsavage.com. Hillary Clinton says U.S.-Mexico border is now secure. She says the focus should now be on legalizing illegals. Now, you know she's a crazed demagogue. All Democrats are crazed demagogues. They want the Mexicans here for voting, period. U.S.-Mexico border is secure. Ask the Border Patrol if it's secure. Here's one from the Daily Caller. Hillary faces security establishment uprising over emails. The security establishment is going berserk over what she did. But because they own Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer, and the like of the boys in the band, there's no focus on this, ever. Here's another Hillary story. Black Democrats are not turning out for Hillary like they did for Obama. It could imperil her chances of winning the White House. That's a good news. Hey, that's good news, Bear. Yeah, that's good stuff. Here's another story. UK officials warn Obama. What? They said something to the king? UK officials warn Obama, stay out of Britain's EU referendum. Comes to us from Breitbart London. 5 members of the British Parliament and a member of the European Parliament have written to U.S. President Barack Humpty Dumpty Obama, urging him to stay out of Britain's referendum on the country's membership of the European Union. Conservative, Labour, Conservative, Democratic Unionist, and UKIP leader have co-authored a letter to President Humpty Dumpty warning him that an intervention by a foreign leader could have the opposite effect it intended. Can you believe this? They said the referendum, whether to leave the EU, is an act of democracy in its most direct form, and the question of whether or not to leave the EU is a rare political topic that is not owned by any one political party. This is a chance for the British people to choose the path of their country. Interfering in our debate over national sovereignty would be an unfortunate milestone at the end of your term as president, and that's sent to Humpty. Here's another one that Humpty did while you slept. The smiling president did something while you slept again. From the Free Beacon, Morgan Chalfant. President Humpty Dumpty sought to increase the amount of money available for the federal government to spend on former presidents in advance of his White House exit. Can you believe the audacity of this guy? I mean, really, this is sickening. This guy is acting now like a crazed mad dictator, overtly. Before he leaves, he asks them to increase the budget for ex-presidents. What for? What does he need the money for? So she can maintain her 72 personal assistants? Or buy the Oscar de la Yenta dresses? Who pays for her dresses, Oscar de la Yenta dresses? Who buys the Oscar de la Yenta dresses for her? I think he's gone anyway. Let's see, how much a year? The president's FY 2017 budget seeks $3.865 in appropriation for expenditures for former presidents, an increase of 18% from 2016. That's nothing. They're a great couple. That extra money could be used, believe me, could be put to good use. Good use. Very good use. Black Dems aren't turning out for Hillary like they did for Obama. Sheriff David Clark tweets video of John Kasich traffic stop. I'm not interested in that. 60 wounded soldiers will get penis transplants. This is not a funny story, but it's worth talking about. This I don't understand because, of course, if a guy's injured in combat, and they say the first thing that doctors notice when men wake up after a debilitating injury from combat, when they wake up after getting hurt, they don't care if they're missing an arm or a leg. The first thing they ask is my penis still intact, said John Hopkins spokesmouth Taylor Graham. They worry about the arms and legs later. It's not a laughing matter, but the thing is, can this really work? 60 servicemen? During the surgery, they will take the member from a recently deceased man and attempt to attach it to the soldier's body. Using a microscope, the doctors will join the nerves and blood vessels together with the hope that the organ will be fully functional. The procedure does not include testes attachment. No jokes, no joking. It's just eventually this will work if they can clone a dog. Maybe they can clone a you-know-what. Can you wait a minute. Sorry, I know it's not a joke. Can you clone? No, then it's still not operational, even if it's cloned. It needs a supply. What else is in the news? Oh, it's awful. The news is so horrible it can make a strong man ill. The Muslims are at it again. Female suicide bomber kills 24 at Nigerian mosque. So Muslim versus Muslim. They're killing each other. Again, the Sunni killing the Shia. They hate each other more than you could ever imagine. You have no idea how the Muslims hate each other over something that no one even can understand. You thought that the Irish troubles were bad. Protestant versus Catholic, that's like baby play compared to this. This is something that goes back 1,000 years. Descendants of the original or the copy. They blow up the other guy's mosque with children in it, and now they're using dumb women, backwards women from the villages to strap bombs to their... Madmen. Just madmen. The whole thing is madness, this religious garbage. This religious garbage is killing us. That's why we said, why bring in more Muslims to America right now till we can, quote, figure this thing out, as Trump said. You want to bring in the bombers? You want to bring in the good ones? Oh, of course you want to bring in the good ones. Well, how do you vet them? Are they going to tell you that they're the good ones? They shave off the beard? They can't get a hate transplant. They can't get the hate out of their heart. It was inculcated from childhood. So that leads me to a bigger story here that I wanted to get into. In my last book, Government Zero, I talked about the confluence of dangers that the West is facing because of a coming together of progressive so-called and Muslims. And people couldn't understand why in the world would progressives and Muslims get along so well. And someone wrote me a letter. Listener Linda said, Michael Savage asked the question a couple of weeks back. Same one I'm asking myself. Why do the Muslims and the leftists both have the same agenda in terms of open borders all over the world? This doesn't make sense, being that liberals are not about covering up and they are pro-gay rights, etc. However, after listening to a left-wing radio show, the answer hit me like a ton of bricks, she writes. This left-wing guy was explaining his philosophy on immigration, and it suddenly struck me. And this is why people like George Soros and the Bilderbergs have the same agenda about open borders as the radical Muslims. They have a plan in place based on the naivete of the Muslim population. This is their idea. They will swarm the Western nations with third world radicals who will then assimilate with white women, mentally absorb the culture, and in turn appreciate the culture and be thankful to the countries that brought them in. Albeit hard for one generation, the next generation of maximum 2 generations will be non-Muslim, neutral people who will no longer have the radical ideology of their parents' grandparents. The leftist belief seems to be industrial-level rape seems to be a small price to pay when you think about the near utopia it will bring in 1 or maximum 2 generations. Sadly, what they don't realize is that these people are not like the Jews or the Italians. This is not a religion, she writes, Political Islam has subjugated other civilizations for 1,400 years. She writes, all of Islam is based upon the trilogy, the Quran, the Sirah, and Hadith. Most of the Islamic doctrine is political, not religious. Islam is a political ideology, writes Linda. And so I sent this to a brilliant guy in New York, a good friend of mine, Jeff Rovin, and I asked him what he thinks. And I'm going to read you what he wrote because it's good stuff. Really good stuff. Is it too much for the average show? I don't know anymore. I do know, actually. I don't care. I can't care really what the... See, if I think about what you really want to hear, what you're used to hearing, or what you want to talk about, I can guarantee you, if I said today, Trump, Cruz, and I said it, Trump, Cruz, for the next 2 months, my ratings would go up. If I said Democrat, Republican for the next 2 months, if I said brokered convention for the next 2 months, my ratings would be higher than what they're going to be. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to talk about what's interesting to me, or I may as well not be on radio. So, in other words, I'm going to skew towards people who think, which is why I call the Savage Nation radio show talk radio for the thinking person. I'm not going to read from a history book. That's something history teachers did that put me to sleep. I'd rather read the phone book than read the history book. So I'm going to read you what Jeff Rovin wrote about the Muslims combined with the progressives. Would you like to hear that? Raise your hand if you want to hear that. Otherwise, I'll just play rock and roll and be a disc jockey today. Jeff writes, this is obviously a complex question. There is not a one-size-fits-all answer. The left wants open borders because it means the elimination of resistance to progressivism. Who will these people vote for? If not now, then in a generation, except for Democrats on the left. That happens to dovetail, at the moment, with a broader idea of the blending of races to eliminate pure white, pure black, Asian, you name it. I see it in the way Hollywood and Broadway and advertising are casting exotic people of color. Whites need not apply. The abomination of a play on Broadway called Hamilton, where Thomas Jefferson is literally depicted as Superfly, has spawned an upcoming revival of 1776 that will have a, quote, diverse cast, as the producer told me a while ago. An Asian Abigail Adams? An Hispanic John Hancock? Could be. As for the Muslims, since the days of El Cid and the Reconquista, and before that, of course, the Crusades, that war has been ideological. Unlike the Roman Emperor Constantine, who merged faiths, Christians, Mithra, and smaller sects, the goal is domination and extermination of competing ideas. Now, of course, Christian missionaries once did this also, in China, for example, in the American West, in Hawaii, but they did so rather non-violently. It just so happens that these leftist and Muslim goals are aligned right now, akin to the way the divergent views of the 13 colonies had the same immediate goal, though the seeds of the Civil War were planted then and there in our independence. One reason people fear Trump, and you, Michael Savage, is because the curtain will be pulled back on this clutch of master plans in time for them to be stopped. If we get Hillary, it will surely be too late. Thank you, Jeff Rovin. Now let's have some rock and roll because I exhausted some people's IQ. The residual IQ that's left in the brain of the mass audience was just absorbed. They're already searching the dial for sports. Oh, darling. Where are you, darling? I still love those old rock and roll songs when they break into an actual voice. Do we have one of those with a voice that breaks in the middle of the singing, a guy with a great voice? Darling, where are you now that I need you? I am sitting so lonely here, waiting for you. Who knew these were great songs in those days? But you don't want to hear this either. All right, turn it off. Old-fashioned. It's like a 58 Buick. They have a limited, it's like not Cuba. I'm not living in Havana. Who's going to make a fortune on those cars already? Which one of Obama's sidekicks is going to cash in on the export of the 50s cars? Which one of the shysters around Obama already got the car export business lined up? People are rotting in prisons in Cuba already. We hear it's a paradise island. Finally, Obama calls ISIS atrocities genocide after years of saying that it's not Islam, not genocide, whatever. Dog lost at sea and presumed dead, found 5 weeks later at San Clemente Island. Can you believe this? Dogs amaze me. Why are they so smart? Teddy puts on such an act for me when he wants cheese. He could look like a little koala bear lately. He's addicted to cheese. I got to admit that to you. He loves provolone, but like a lower fat provolone. Safeway provolone is, in my estimation, the best provolone out there. Primo Taglio, but you're not supposed to pronounce the G. Taglio, whatever. Taglio. I'm not from Italiano, so I say Taglio because it's easier to tell to the clerk. But he loves that cheese so much that if I pull it out, it's like you can't put it away. It's like cocaine to a cokehead. It's like OxyContin to a Democrat. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUICO. So here's a few other stories. Some of them are so terrible, I'm not going to read them to you. Gruesome details emerge of Islamic State's slaughter of 4 nuns in Yemen. If I read to you what the Muslims did to these nuns, you're actually liable to wake up to what Obama's not doing to save Christians around the world, and that might get you upset. You may actually have to reconsider your progressive policies. Wait, sorry, I forgot you hate nuns. Sorry, I'll take that back. You probably would applaud it, saying they got what they deserve. Lucien V. Truscott IV, what a name that is, villagevoice.com. He's still writing? When I was 18 and looking in the back for earring ads, he was writing. Lucien Truscott IV, Village Voice. This guy's still around? The masses are revolting why the have-nots in the Hamptons are pulling for Trump. And he says that the people who work with their hands out there are jumping for Trump. They run machines, are by and large male and middle-aged or older, and they work with their hands for a living. They run machines in the factory on the turnpike, or they paint houses and they repair plumbing. Some of them work for the big landscaping companies that trim the gin lane hedges and most Sagaponack lawns. The people who are suddenly jumping for Trump. That's a good line, by the way. Send it on to the Trump people. Jump for Trump. Give it to them for free. Jump for Trump. Maybe the NBA will go for it. That'll be a good one, isn't it? Good. I'm sending it right now. Jump for Trump.
Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation. Talk radio for the thinking person, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
Decision that if you have a good sense of humor, you'll live longer. I think it's well known that if you're thin, you live longer, and if you smile, you live longer. If you frown and you're fat, you live shorter. So I decided to have a good time on the radio again, which I've been trying to do, by the way. You don't have to really try if you do. If you keep telling people how great you are and happy you are, you're not happy, you're not great. So I'm not going to tell you I'm great and happy, even though I think that may be true. Here's an article that, we have to look at this, because if you're a statistician, a bean counter, and you look at a thing like this, you say, how can this go on? Social Security Administration beneficiaries top 60 million people. I cannot believe a story like this. The number of people receiving bennies from the Social Security Administration topped 60 million for the first time at the beginning of 2016. Now, as you well know, Obama's an insane Humpty Dumpty. He has been pumping people into the social welfare system as fast as he can. He's flooding them over the borders. He's pushing them on benefits they were never entitled to. And this is what's going on. Now, what you may not know is, it is a name for it. The Old Age and Survivors Insurance and Disability Insurance Trust Funds. Listen to this. Old Age and Survivors Insurance and Disability Insurance Trust Funds paid benefits to 60 million bennies. and it's going up. The average monthly benefit paid per beneficiary in December was $1,228. In January, it was $1,229. In February, it was $1,230. Now, the total number of beneficiaries include retired workers and their dependents, survivors of deceased workers, and disabled workers and their dependents. Now, could anyone listening to this show tell me if the intent of Social Security was ever to pay money to survivors of deceased workers? Never. Never. What are we paying survivors of deceased workers for? And then there's a huge racket called disabled workers. Don't get me wrong, there are people who are genuinely disabled, but not as many as collect SSI. I know many of them in San Francisco sit in cafes, they've never worked a day in their life, and they collect what is known as crazy checks. All you got to do is go to the Cafe Trieste on the corner of Vallejo and right off Columbus in San Francisco. You'll see a bunch of motley crew sitting in there. All they do is write hateful screeds against America, Donald Trump, Michael Savage, and they collect crazy checks and they laugh about it. Why should they be given money? Why aren't they cleaning the streets? Should be given a broom and told to sweep the streets that they dirtied. Now, you look at the numbers and you say this can't go on. In other words, in February, there are 151 million people employed in either full or part-time jobs in the U.S. Now, you hear the full or part-time. You know what that really means. That means of the 60 million receiving Social Security, they equal 1 out of 2.5 workers are sucking the system dry. There were 123 million people employed full-time, right? So that means approximately 2.05 full-time workers per each beneficiary of the Social Security Administration. Now, if you run this graph forward, eventually and not too far in the future, there'll be more beneficiaries, so-called, meaning parasites, who have not put money into the system than there are people providing money for the system. So where's the money going to come from? Under Humpty Dumpty, the Social Security Administration spent a record $944 billion in fiscal 2015. Is that $944 billion? Yeah, $944 billion? Almost $1 trillion is spent on Social Security in fiscal 2015? That's astounding. This can't go on. I don't have an answer for you on this other than to crack down on the fake disability cases and make them pay it back. Number two, all those who do not pay into Social Security should not be eligible for benefits. There's fraud. Half the people on disability insurance are Obama fraudsters. Time to cut off all the non-U.S. citizens and those illegal aliens collecting on behalf of their U.S.-born anchor babies. Boy, can I tell you stories about that. They're coming here, dumping a baby on our shore, flying back to their home country, and then the baby suddenly is a citizen. You hear this? That's the U.S. government for you. Now, what do you want to say about this? Nothing. Everything the government touches is a Ponzi scheme. And now this is why they're bringing in illegal aliens. The statisticians or the bean counters in the government are looking at this saying, wait a minute, we can't sustain this. So bring in as many million as you can, but they're not working. They're not all coming here to work. Many of them are sucking the system dry through their spouses and their children. I don't understand that. They don't see that. They don't care about that. They don't care about what goes out. They care about what comes in. So they're just doing it on one side of the ledger sheet, not on both sides. Don't call me on this. It's impossible to talk about. But you see, this is what I say to you. I start the last hour showing you that Obama hires a woman, makes her a general. She's never flown an aircraft in combat. Now she's the head of Combat Air Command. Combat Air, General Linda, whatever. Combat Air Commander. That's like hiring someone who never did surgery, as I said, to be chief of surgery. But because she's watched surgery through a window on a video screen. That's like hiring an air traffic controller to be a pilot aboard land the jet on an aircraft carrier. This is Obama, Humpty Dumpty. So you expect him to manage the economy? The man never managed anything before he became president. He never held a job. This is why Trump is surging, by the way. As flawed a businessman as some of you are told he is, and I don't believe he's a flawed businessman, business is brutal. Business is war. Business is a jungle. It's a rapacious jungle. And things are done in business that are done in war. And in order to rise to the top of business, you have to be pretty ruthless. And that's what we need as a president, not a con man, community organizer, or a U.S. senator who never managed a hot dog stand. Never managed a hot dog stand. What are you putting so much hope in another guy who's a part of the government? A senator never ran a business. And his ideas are good, but that's like hiring a woman who never flew in combat to be a commander of the Air Force. That's the same thing as like hiring a senator to run the economy. You'll get the same results you got from Obama. They don't know what they're talking about. You need a hard-nosed businessman to do it, which is why he's popular in plain English. That's it. It's really not that complicated. That's just really the whole story. I don't think I should take any calls on any of this. But, you ask about Social Security. I never talk about it because it's perhaps the most deadly boring topic in the history of talk radio is the Social Security fund. But it occurred to me that it's maybe worth talking about because I don't know how anyone can fix this. The minute you take anyone off a benefit, they're going to scream you're a thisist or a thatist. You're an anti-this, you're an anti-that. You're throwing people in the street. If Donald Trump becomes president, he'll throw widows and orphans in the gutter. And Hillary says, if I become president, everyone will collect a government check. We'll send checks from the U.S. government around the world. Every poor person in Africa and India will get one if I'm elected. That's called demagoguery. $1,200 a month. It's not a lot of money, but it's a fortune to those who are paying it. It's a lot of money. So there's math. What was Social Security originally intended for? Do you know that drunks and drug addicts are now counted as disabled and allowed to receive Social Security? Did you know that they declared them illnesses? That's why they said, "Oh, I'm not a drug addict. I'm ill. I'm ill." See, if you claim that you're a drunk, you can now be called disabled. That's how it works. They claim that they're disabled because they're a drunk. They're not putting down mentally ill people here. Mental illness is a serious problem. But if you walk in with a lawyer and all you are is a drunk, you're going to collect Social Security. Anyone can get SSI with a crooked lawyer. I see the shysters advertising on television. It doesn't get any uglier than lawyers who push this. I tell you, there's a couple of classes of lawyers who should be in prison. Immigration lawyers in prison for gaming the system. Fake disability lawyers in the prison. There are a couple of other categories of law that it's not really law. It's just stealing what they used to say with a fountain pen. When I grew up, they said you could rob more with a fountain pen than a gun. Remember that? Then they don't say that anymore because you don't need a fountain pen. You can rob more now with a computer than you can with a gun. Only idiots use guns to rob. The smart ones hire a lawyer and take it legitimately by stealing it from the hardworking American people. And that's why I think we're all praying to God we get a businessman in there who's going to really take no prisoners and clean things up. How much of this money is being paid to illegal aliens who are scamming the system with fraudulent IDs? A lot of them. And how many illegal aliens are coming here and paying no taxes and changing their names after a certain number of years, and then they change their name on their business so they pay no taxes again, and their spouses are sitting at home collecting Social Security? Lots of them. All right, my friends, those are some of the issues on this Rock and Roll Friday. I don't want to burden you with it. It's a little painful for a day like today. I get it. But it's been a very long week. It's like a hard day's night this week. The news is pretty awful if you really look at it. If you want to skate over it like a butterfly, you can do it. And that's okay. But if you really want to look at what's going on under the surface, it's not very good to look at this stuff. And before I take my first break in this hour, invite your calls because I've taken none thus far. Because like a mad bear, just before the show, I ate a half a jar of jam. I rarely do it, but I'm feeling, a little sluggish today because of allergies. So I have a certain French jam with no sucrose in it. I use it as an excuse because I know it's all fructose. It doesn't matter. It's just a slower burning fuel. Oh man, I put it on a bagel. I just ate a half a jar. I felt like a bear broke into a cabin in Tahoe and just dipped his fingers in the honey. I wanted to recommend the book for you to all look into. It's a great book by Cheryl Chumley. It's called The Devil in D.C., Winning Back the Country from the Beast in Washington. Cheryl Chumley is one of my favorite journalists. She writes for a number of newspapers. She writes for WorldNet Daily, and this is a WND book. Oh, they quote me on the front. It hits the nail on the head of what's wrong with America and then tells how to fix it. The Devil in D.C. And the back quotes Governor Mike Huckabee. He also likes the book. And I like the book. And I like the author. This is the Savage Nation. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now. 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
My Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com. It's the only company I trust to protect my wealth. Call 800-BUI-CO. So, don't think that I don't care about the poor. I do. Because I come from the poor. And I know what poverty is. It's not that I ever wanted for a meal. That's not what I'm saying. But I know what it is to be a struggling immigrant family and wanting to fit into this country. And how hard it is for the kids, particularly who want to be American. They want to wear the right clothes. And you don't have the money for it. It's hard. But that's what motivates you to keep going. So you work 2 jobs and you say, I'm going to eventually get some nice clothes. And I'm going to get a nice car. I'm going to get a nice house. And I'm going to earn it myself. No one's going to give it to you. Because, I read the Bible. I know what the Psalms say about leaders who want to help the poor. And you read a Psalm of David, Psalm 41. Happy is he that considereth the poor. The Lord will deliver him in the day of evil. The Lord preserve him and keep him alive. Let him be called happy in the land. So what the Bible is saying is if a leader takes care of the poor, he's a good man and he'll be taken care of by God. I have nothing against that. But when you have a hypocrite like Humpty Dumpty in the White House who abuses the taxpayer through excessive spending, excessive travels, and even raising the budget for ex-presidents so he and his old lady can have a good time after they're out of office on our dime, he's called a hypocrite. He's not helping the poor, he's helping himself to your money. See, if we had a humble president who wasn't living like this, I can handle some of his liberalism. But he's a fraud. At least in my opinion. Why should I get so worked up about it? No one cares, right? It's not a story for Jake Tapper. He's busy covering how bad Trump is. I love there's an article about Trump today from the New York Post about how he speaks at a 4th grade level. And that's why he's popular. They're trying to figure it out. Donald Trump speaks like a 4th grader, says Laura Italiano from the New York Pizzeria Post. Donald Trump, she writes, connects with voters by using simple, commanding language that even a 4th grader could understand. A report. And the style has been so successful that his competitors are copying it. To his supporters, Trump's style is refreshingly direct. Wired magazine's Chelsea Coe, a real genius, Chelsea Coe. What does she make? Nothing a year. But she's already noting how dumb Trump is. Noting that a commonly used formula for assessing reading skills shows the GOP frontrunner consistently speaking at a 4th grade level. Miss Coe of Wired magazine, have you assessed the reading skills of an NBA player recently? Or have you assessed the reading skills of Al Sharpton? Have you done the same assessment for any of the progressives recently? So they write, from a linguistic point of view, part of the trick is not to assume a high level of literacy. The same Wired analysis shows the language of Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio decreasing in reading level as the debates wore on. Cruz's language, she writes, gradually decreased in complexity, starting out in almost 10th grade for the first 2 debates, then falling to just above 8th grade by February and early this month. I don't see such an analysis of very famous icons of the left, do you? What's the reading level and the speaking level of Al Sharpton? He was an expert. Remember Al Sharpton gave a speech on global warming. That was about the level of a submoron. I didn't see an analysis by Laura Italiano's buddies at Wired magazine. That pollution's damaging the minority community. What level is that at, Laura? The king has no clothes. 2 legs good, 4 legs bad. Laura, did you read Animal Farm recently? Is that allowed to be read at the New York Post? All right, so Donald Trump speaks simplistically. That makes him dumb? They don't know what to make of him. That's the reason. Back in a minute. Have not, Hillary's going to help you somehow, or worse yet, that Bernie is going to help you. You assume that if Bernie gets elected, if you're a have-not, he's going to help you buy a house, and that everything will be coming up roses. It'll all come from somebody else. How has that worked out in countries that have tried massive redistribution of wealth? There are examples of this, and you don't have to go any further than South America. Take a look at what the socialist policies of the last leader of the most northern South American country has wrought. First it was Chavez and his socialist policies, the anti-gringo policies. Then it was this last character, whose name I forgot. They can't even produce enough food for themselves. The electricity is being turned off. It sounds like Marin County, California, where the electricity goes on and off like in Poland before the collapse of the wall. So we can talk about that. Why do Americans consume 80% of all prescription painkillers? Writes Michael Snyder, the Economic Collapse blog. He writes, if Americans are so happy, why do we consume 80% of the entire global supply of prescription painkillers? Less than 5% of the world's population lives in this nation, and yet we buy 4/5 of these highly addictive drugs. In the United States today, approximately 4.7 million Americans are addicted to prescription pain relievers. That represents about a 300% increase since 1999. So, well, in the Appalachians, these prescription painkillers are commonly known as hillbilly heroin. And all of the attention that the New Hampshire primaries received focused a lot of attention on how this crisis is destroying countless numbers of lives in the Northeast. But one survey found that the states with the highest problems with painkiller addiction, are in the West. National Survey on Drug Use and Health, a survey of approximately 65 million people, found that the states with the highest rates of narcotic painkiller abuse were Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington. Go figure. So what's this all about? That's considered a disability now. If you're addicted to painkillers, so you can sit at home and collect a government check. Okay, KKOH, Jamie, what's your topic? We open the lines up to the callers on the Savage Nation. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how you doing this afternoon? I saw a report that came out this week by this think tank called the Economic Intelligence Unit, EIU, and they rank things that are risky, and they have a Trump presidency in the top 10 most risky things that could happen to the world economy, and it's right up there with Britain leaving the EU and the EU breaking up and war in the South Sea.
In other words, the sky will fall if Trump becomes president. The only safe solution is communism. Who is it? The Economist wrote that? They turned far left. I used to read The Economist when I was a young man, and then I noticed it moved to the far left fringes. I don't know what happened to them.
It was featured in The Economist, but it was a separate think tank, the EIU, that I've never heard of.
And what do they say Trump will do to cause this economic meltdown? Do they know?
I haven't read in the details of it, but I guess, it's like everything else. It's vague on details. They call him out for being vague on details, but then he's racist.
Yeah, he's in other words, the sky is falling, but they don't say why.
Exactly. The most popular argument we have going these days is someone says, Trump's racist. Okay, well, if he's so racist, you have an example, and you hear crickets. And there's nothing there.
Nothing there.
Nothing there.
His daughter marries an Orthodox Jewish man. His grandchildren are Jewish from that marriage, and yet he's a racist. How does that work?
I guess he must hate himself. He must hate everybody. He's universal.
All right, Jamie, thanks for being so observant up there in Reno, Nevada. We now go to JCW Radio in Tennessee. Lovely state. Frank, welcome to the Savage Nation. What's on your mind?
You talked about the American College of Pediatrics, and you were surprised at their statement. I think you may be confusing the Academy of Pediatrics with the College of Pediatrics.
Oh, yeah, I am confusing them. I thought they were one and the same.
No, the Academy of Pediatrics is the one that tends to be liberal, generally politically correct statements. The American College of Pediatrics generally have well-researched articles, well thought out.
Because when I see it says, look, it says the American College of Pediatrics issued a position statement saying gender ideology harms children, which is common sense. It says human sexuality is an objective biological binary trait. X, Y, and XX, they write, are genetic markers of health, not genetic markers of a disorder. It says, in exceedingly rare exceptions of sexual differentiation, such disorders represent a third sex. And I was surprised because generally the American Academy of Pediatrics is very liberal, correct?
That's correct. The Academy of Pediatrics is generally very political.
All right, Frank, thank you for calling. Now, it's very important that you understand that. Let's see. WTMA Radio, South Carolina. Frank, what's on your mind? Calls coming in. What's on your mind today from South Carolina?
Hey, Michael, I was just going to talk about the appointment of that General Robinson.
Yeah, the woman who never flew an airplane has been made to head up the Air Force in the Pacific.
Not just
which makes her the first non-pilot to command air power in such a large theater of operation. This is a classic Obama move. Classic Humpty Dumpty.
It's not just the Air Force. It's the whole Northern Command. It's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, over the whole continental United States, Alaska, everywhere. It's more than you think. It's not just the Air Force.
This is the first time a non-pilot has been put in charge of such a big position, and it's being done for one reason and one reason only. It's because of affirmative action and, quote, diversity.
I hear you. So,
thank you for the call. There's nothing more I can say about it other than, how could a President Trump fix this? It's simple. Demote her. Demote everyone that Obama forced upwards in the command structure and spend a fortune hiring back the people who either quit or driven out of the military over these 8 years of this regime, the Stalinist regime under Obama. They can find the men who were thrown out or forced out. They can give them sign-back bonuses. They could put a fund together of millions of dollars, sign-back bonuses to get back the real McCoy into the military and demote these Potemkin generals. That's what I would do. That's what I'd do immediately if you wanted to save the military from this destructive train wreck that Obama is conducting. WTMA, South Carolina again. Greg, you're on the Savage Nation.
Hey, Mike. I was just listening to you on that New York Post article, okay? Trump's a genius, actually. I mean, that's brilliant what he's doing because he's keeping it simple. That's advertising. Advertising, every billboard you see is at third grade, second grade level. That's what he's doing. If you want to take a schematic and simplify it, how do you do it? You simplify it with short, easy things for people to hear and understand right away.
Well, I agree with you. It's called sound bites. That's what we use in talk radio by and large. If I get into a more detailed discussion of any subject, I know my audience is dissipating.
Idiot.
If I keep it simple and just hammer the same basic talking points that you hear all day long, Democrat, Republican, Cruz, Trump, convention, brokered convention, the audience can follow that, and they will. A certain small audience will follow that. But if I want to get into an actual idea or a discussion, I risk losing a portion of my audience who has no attention span. So I'm aware of what Trump is facing. He's talking to a broad mass audience out there. Of course he has to keep it simple, stupid. That's how it works. That doesn't mean he himself is stupid. Don't confuse that with stupidity. You can sound smart and be dumb. You can sound dumb and be smart. That's how that works. Let's see. What now? Oh, the Social Security fraud. You know what I want to do for fun? If anyone out there knows someone collecting Social Security on a fake disability payment, would you call the Savage Nation at 855-472-82? Let's call it Disability Fraud Horror Stories. Talk to us about the people who are cashing in on the taxpayers' back. That's a good story. WABC, Ruth, thanks for holding. What's on your mind, Ruth?
Hi, I enjoy your show. Thank you for speaking to me. I have several points. Trump. Okay, they say he appeals to a very low class and, they're not intelligent. My cousin is a PhD, internationally known in his field, has traveled to 40 different countries, 700 libraries doing research. He has been a Trump sympathizer and fan ever since he started to run. I felt the same way. When I heard he was running, I said, finally, somebody who can't be bought. That was the first.
Yeah, but that's the main theme of people who support him, is somebody who can't be bought, and that's apparently threatening to those who have been bought.
And now what's going on now just shows the magnitude of it. I never thought it went this far, that they would spend $400 million to disparage him in 2 weeks. That's what I heard on some of these shows on TV or on Hannity.
Well, what do you mean? Who's going to spend the $400 million? The Republicans themselves?
Well, it must be the super PACs. They must have the money. Somebody.
Yeah, well, they know that the party would be over if he wins. They're going to be out of luck. So they'd rather see Hillary elected because, as I said before, guys like those who run the Weekly Standard never worked a day in their life. They inherited money and they created a little magazine for themselves. Or the folks at the National Review, some of whom are very literate, but too literate for their own good. They've never run a business, so they don't like Trump. He's not a member of their, would-be William F. Buckley clan.
Not only that, I studied and I worked in business all my life. And I worked for a very high-powered commercial real estate broker who dealt with Trump. And we dealt with him. High-powered executives do not think in detail. They think, I have to do this, and then they find a way to get it done. And they don't bother with the details as much.
Right, exactly right, and that's something that the intellectual pinheads don't understand. They think in shorthand and they speak in shorthand. Their minds are running so fast. I have someone in my family who's an economic titan. He speaks in shorthand. He gets very frustrated if you don't understand what he's saying because he thinks you should understand it before it leaves his mouth because his mind is running on so many things at once. And I understand him very, very well. He gets frustrated because we can't follow him sometimes, and it's because he's so fast. It's the same with Trump. And I would say that the fools don't understand that because they've never been around anybody who's actually that fast.
Exactly, and he's a Gemini, so that makes him even faster.
That I can't speak to. I'm an Aries. That makes me faster than a Gemini. I'm sorry to tell you. Thank you for the call. We're talking, I guess, about the same thing all over again. And that is why the elite hate Trump. And it's pretty obvious why. I don't have to, re-articulate it. Yesterday I did a great show on why do you hate or fear Trump. I thought that was a great show. I don't want to do that again. WBEN New York, Kevin, here's a great caller waiting for someone to hear this. Kevin, what's on your mind today?
Michael, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for a couple of weeks ago bringing up the issue of radical Islam, its rise and influence in the Caribbean, because it has had a direct impact in my life and where I am today. And unfortunately, I see the seeds of that growing here in America, and Americans are so dumb. They're watching the Kardashians and all the crap out there and not paying attention to what's happening. Right now in Western New York, I am also concerned about the Donald Trump campaign right now because we have our representative in Congress jumping the gun and declaring himself the first in Congress to leave the Bush campaign and jumping with Donald Trump. There are traitors on board, and I want people to know that they got to be careful with this, in the Trump campaign. And
who is this congresswoman? Who is it you're mentioning that says she's joining Trump all of a sudden?
Collins, sir, and that guy.
No, who is the person you mentioned, though?
The person I mentioned?
Yeah, who is this congressman who's joining a Trump campaign who you said is a snake in the grass?
His name is Chris Collins.
Never heard of him. I don't know why Trump would want an unknown politician on his side. Yeah, the issue, thanks for calling, of the Muslim invasion of the Caribbean is a big one, and it's mainly in the American Virgin Islands, not so much in the British West Indies. The British Virgin Islands, rather, are not so much being invaded as much as the American Virgin Islands. If you go to St. Thomas, you will see mosques going up everywhere. And if you talk to the indigenous black workers who live in these islands, and you ask them if they're a taxi driver about the Muslims who are coming in and how they're ripping off the system, not paying taxes, leaving after a few years, changing their names, coming back under a new name, running a taxi business, sending the money back to Saudi Arabia, bringing in their wives and children, you will understand that what is going on there is a direct result of Humpty Dumpty's policies. I'll be back in a minute.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by Swiss America, the only company I trust with my financial future. Call 800-289-2646 or Swiss America. All right, thanks very much. Break that record. All right, so we've talked about Humpty Dumpty in the White House appointing a fake general, the only non-pilot ever picked to head the entire Air Force in the Pacific, just as he's picking a fake moderate to put on the Supreme Court. And just as everything he does is based upon fraud and deceit, she's replacing a real general, Herbert Carlisle, a career F-15 pilot, who they demoted to Air Combat Command at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. So Humpty Dumpty in the White House has broken the military egg, picks General Robinson, not a career pilot. She's an air battle manager. That's like an air traffic controller, who has never flown a jet in combat. Instead, she's flown as a passenger aboard the AWACS and EHA stars. But nevertheless, there's a drive for more diversity in the Pentagon under the quisling defense secretary, one in a long line there right now, Ashton Carter, a man who was put in there, like his predecessors, to destroy and degrade the military as fast as he can, under the guise of diversity, you know. So now we have this. And by the way, she has to be confirmed by the Senate. But with Orrin Hatch there, don't worry about it. She'll be ushered right into the position. The way Ruth Bader Ginsburg was put on the Supreme Court, and the way this stealth left-winger will be put on the Supreme Court. Who killed Scalia?
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-72. Warning. The Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. And now, America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation. Talk radio for the thinking person, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, Michael Savage.
This I'm not interested in. This I could do without. It's hour 3, you know, people are already exhausted from listening to me. Let's pick something good, like one I haven't played yet. What didn't we play? We played already We Belong Together. We played Across the Sea. We played I Want You to Be My Girl. We played I Wonder Why. Did we play I Wonder Why? Who? No, that's the Book of Love. Welcome to the Savage Nation. If you want to hear the news, turn on the television. If you want to read the news in a short burst, go to the internet. If you want to discuss the news, views, and reviews, keep listening to the Savage Nation. Hey, give me the Dells, Oh What a Night. Let's see how that is. Or the Moonglow's Secret Love. Or the Paragons, Let's Start All Over Again. That would be good, because I'm in the mood for Rock and Roll Friday. The Harp Tones. Look at the names of these groups. The Cufflinks, the Clovers, the Flamingos, the Genies. I'm not going to make a comparison to what we have today. The gangbangers of today who pass themselves off as musicians when they're basically just cultural vandals in plain English. So let's look at the news headlines while Robert's searching for these old songs. Savage Afternoon headlines. Here's why Congress says Obama has wrecked NASA. Daily Caller. Lawmakers grilled National Aeronautics and Space Administration Administrator Charles Bolden during a hearing yesterday on Obama's 2017 budget plan. In other words, he's putting a plan in for after he's gone to see if he can gut NASA further. And the head of NASA said that NASA's budget proposal is far more concerned with spending on global warming research than supporting the agency's mission of space exploration. This budget takes our human spaceflight program nowhere fast. This budget undermines our space program. You get the picture. It's like putting a woman in charge of the Air Force who's never flown in combat. Same thing. Everywhere you turn, Humpty Dumpty, seeing how fast he can break the egg of America. Marco Rubio blames the media for his wrecked presidential ambitions. Oh, boy. Blame the victim, huh? No, that's not right. Jason Link in Huffington Post. Senator Marco Rubio is very disappointed in media. And he dropped out of the race. He said he's not even going to run, but he said he's now attacking the media. That's the source of his problems. According to the Twin Cities Pioneer Press, which represents one of the only parts of the country that seem to manifest an enthusiasm for Marco, the Florida senator had a sort of after-action meeting with his Minnesota supporters where he explained it was the political press that did him in. This election was entirely driven by national media coverage in many ways, Rubio said. When the media narrative goes negative on you and all the news is bad, that's ridiculous. It's when he started with the big man, little hands. That's what did it. And when we all found that he was a stooge of Ellison and Adelson and wanted open borders, that's what did it. It was his policies. It wasn't the media. And I love him blaming the press. We invited him on this show. He would never come on. He was a coward. We invited Cruz on. He won't come on. He's a coward. By the way, the only one who came on the show repeatedly is Donald Trump from the get-go. Because he's not a coward. He's not afraid to face the savage nation. Don't get fall for this Cruz garbage. I'm sick and tired of it. You know, it's supposed to like gingerly talk about Cruz because the so-called Tea Party likes him. Where's the Tea Party? Tell me where the Tea Party is. Tell me where they're meeting. I need a cup of tea. There is no Tea Party. It's a construct. There was a time there was a Tea Party. It doesn't exist anymore. There's organizations that call themselves Tea Party this, Tea Party that. Good luck to them. Many of them listen to this show. I get it. But your boy Cruz refused to come on this show because he wouldn't answer real questions. Trump never had a problem with that. Explain that to me. You know, they did an analysis yesterday of how many times Trump has been on my show since 2011. Was it 11 times or 16 times? 16 times he has stepped into the lion's den of the savage nation. 16 times. Cruz, 0. Rubio, 0. There's your answer right there, because he's willing to face the people. Weak resolution approved by U.S. makes action against Iran's missile activity unlikely. No kidding. No kidding. Pope Francis asks nations to open their hearts and their doors to migrants. Oh, I have nothing but contempt for this politician. In his general audience Wednesday, Pope Faker launched an appeal to the nations of the world to open their hearts and their doors to migrants who are standing at the border. And we keep asking the same question over and over again. How many migrants has the Vatican admitted through their 80-foot walls? The answer is none. Hypocrisy, hypocrisy, hypocrisy. The fraudulent Pope compared today's migrants to the people of Israel, who were deported into Babylon in the 7th century B.C., as recounted in the biblical book of the prophet Jeremiah. That is utter nonsense. It has nothing to do with deportation. These people are migrating, not being deported. That's why I called him Lenin's Pope in a brilliant chapter in Government Zero. There they are at the border because so many doors and so many hearts are closed. Today's migrants suffer from the cold, without food and with no way to enter. They do not feel welcome. How it pleases me to hear of nations and rulers who open their hearts and open their doors, he said. Well, the day the Vatican gives away one free pizza to a migrant, maybe a coupon for a pizza somewhere that they can give away a dime of the money they garner from the world's religious. What a world of fraud, man. You just do this day and night, it can get to you. This is all hokum. The whole thing is hokum. I want to talk about conversos, Marranos, and Moriscos in late medieval Spain and beyond. What? Now, this is an interesting story. It is somewhat related to the Pope, because the Christian church was once so vicious that it makes the Muslim fanatics look benign by comparison. No, you have to know the history of it. You know, the modern Catholic Church is a different story. It's so liberal, it's a totally different animal. But if you want to know the history of the Catholic Church, and you'll understand why centuries later there are people who are not Catholic who fear the Catholic Church and the Pope, you'd have to study the conversos, the Moriscos, and the Marranos. I know these are new words. I know converso, Morisco, and Marrano are big words. They're new words. They're not Democrat, Republican. They're not brokered convention. But they're new words, and they're important words. So what is a converso or Morisco? What does it have to do with today? Well, a converso or a Morisco, these are terms applied to those Jews and Muslims who converted to Christianity in large numbers under duress in late medieval Spain. Now, I had known that the Jews were forced to convert, but I didn't know that Muslims also were forced to convert to Christianity. And so there's a whole school of study of the converso and Morisco. that's worth reading for those of you interested in medieval and modern Spanish culture. It's very interesting on the concept of Mudejarism, seeking the Messiah, converso messianism in post-1453 Valencia, if there were God, converso voices in 15th and 16th century Spanish literature. Could you imagine that there are scholars given to this kind of stuff? Converso voices in 15th and 16th century Spanish literature. That's amazing. A thorn in the community, popular religious practice and converso dissidence in Molina de Aragon, Inquisition and crypto-Judaism, the complicity of the Mora family of Quintana de la Orden. You know, you look at crypto-Judaism, I like that phrase, crypto-Judaism, because we have a lot of crypto-conservatives posing themselves off as conservatives by saying you're not a conservative, they're a conservative. That's called the crypto-conservative. And such like that. Morophilia and the Morisco subject. Sancho Panza and the Mimesis of Solomon. I love academic work, don't get me wrong. You know, I love scholarly work. And that's why I thought I'd bring it to you, because these are phrases that are important. I've used the word, I've never talked about conversos or moriscos before. I've talked about Marranos, and I explained to you who they were. Marranos, I said, were Jews who practiced their religion in secret during the Inquisition because they were punished with death, by death, if they were not, Christians. So they would practice their religion in secret. And when I walked in that sand-floored synagogue in St. Thomas a few weeks ago, I got to tell you, I was moved by it in ways I didn't think I'd be moved. I thought of the hundreds of years of people who had such strong faith that they were willing to die for it, number one, and hundreds of years of people of faith who not only were willing to die for it, but practiced their religion in secret to avoid being killed. And then I think of the people of faith today, Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, and I think how remarkable they really are. I myself don't have that strength of spirituality, I'll admit that, but I respect those who do. And the reason I respect those who do is because they are the fundamental spine of the world. I want you to think about that. Without the religious people, where would we get any of our guidance from? Karl Marx? Barack Obama? All of our laws, even our liberal laws, if you want to put them that way, are based upon the kindness of religious laws, incidentally. And so they derive from the kindness of religious laws and are translated into political laws, but they're based upon religious beliefs. And that's why we have to support our religious brothers and sisters. I don't think I say this often enough. I sound very cynical about religion and God, but I think that as a broadcaster who's listened to around the world and respected by people who think, and that's the truth, I think I'm obliged to tell you what I truly believe. As someone once said to me, I know I'm running late now. It always happens in the third hour lately. It's like I kind of don't know exactly what I want to do, and the tempo changes. I get into something a little more philosophical thing, and then I become energized because my brain is fed. Just as a soul needs to be fed, not just with bread, but with spirituality. So a mind needs to be fed, not just with sugar or drugs or meats and carbohydrates, but it needs to be fed with ideas. And if a mind isn't fed with ideas, it atrophies. So I hope to feed you with a little ideas for the weekend today, a few ideas for the weekend. And I want to just for a minute tell you, when I use the phrase Marranos politically on this show over the years, what I was talking about was many of you are practicing conservatives, but you can't practice it openly at your workplace, even in your home, because you're afraid you'll be ostracized if you even tell anybody that you're a Republican or for Trump. The people are so hateful. They are like those in the Spanish Inquisition. It's ironic to me that the liberals who hate religion, and particularly hate the church, are acting exactly like the inquisitors of medieval times. And when they try to put you on the spot at work and ask you who you're going to vote for, they know you're probably not like them. They're all bullies. And they use the group to intimidate you. And many of you are smart not to give up your politics. You practice it. You practice your political beliefs basically in silence and in private, because you know you'll be ostracized, picked on, by the bullies on the left. And that's where I use the phrase Marranos. If you're a secret conservative, I understand that. And then I went to the example of this synagogue that I walked in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, which had a sand floor, one of the oldest synagogues in the Western Hemisphere. The Jews fled Spain and they fled Portugal because they were being killed if they weren't converted to Christianity. And they found a very welcoming home in the Caribbean because it was run by I believe at the time, the Danish owned St. Thomas. The Danish were always very progressive liberal in a good sense. See, not everything about those words is in a bad sense. It's become something different today. Become a very intolerant, bullying set of philosophies rather than an open and tolerant philosophy. But nevertheless, so they found an open place to practice. And the reason they had a sand floor in the synagogue is to remind them of how they had to practice their religious beliefs in private in the home country of Spain or Portugal for fear of being heard outside and being killed. So they put sand on the floor to muffle the sound of the prayers in the basement. Can you imagine this? And when I was in that place of worship, I could literally feel the generations of souls reaching up from the floor and singing to me. I heard them. Well, anyway, I'll be back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
The Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth and financial future. Call 1-800-289-2646. Fascinating. We should read about this stuff because you have to understand the gruesomeness of the Muslim murders that are going on around the world, even to their own fellow Muslims. The gruesomeness of their murder and mayhem. The Islamic State slaughter of 4 nuns in Yemen is enough to make any person weep. They tied them up, these poor nuns, shot them in the head and smashed their heads in, according to an eyewitness who escaped the killing. One of the nuns said she believes that the crushing of the head has some evil connection with the biblical passage that says she will crush the head of the serpent. Some kind of mockery or evil meaning. So here's a small group of religious women, nuns, and they're attacked by, the jihadists. The jihadists studied their quarry carefully, knowing where the women would be at the hour of the attack. After killing 4 nuns, the gunmen searched in vain for the 5th, Sister Sally, in the convent. And we sit here and we just don't even pay any attention to it. Instead, Pope Francis tells us to welcome more Muslims into Europe. That idiot. Well, anyway, you get the picture. So we're talking about... I'd like to talk more about the hidden conservatives in our midst who have to practice their political orientation in silence for fear of being ostracized or fired or not promoted. Many of you in the police departments have to hide your political orientation. Teachers, firemen. You have to hide it. Many minorities have to hide it from their fellow minorities for fear that they'll be ostracized by the new inquisitors. You want to talk about a show killer? Who picked this song? Who's that, Mel Torme? On Delorded? God, that was awful, man. No disrespect meant to Mel Torme, but it's like Mel Torment. This Friday, there's news. You want me to read you the news on Rock and Roll Friday? Okay, play White Light. Get them jacked up on the crack music. That they like. Let's see what's in the news. They don't want to hear about Marranos, Conversos. They want to hear Supreme Court, Obama bad, Republicans worse. I don't know who to vote for, but I know that I'm smarter than everyone. See, I don't understand. Republicans bad, Democrats worse, but I don't know what you should do. Don't you love that as an advice from people in the media? Oh, them Democrats are all socialist. But the Republicans are even worse. They're turncoats. I have no idea what you should do, but I have a rug to sell you and a toupee. Comet to brush Earth closer than any in centuries. I'm going to lay awake at night and think about that. After I brush my teeth, I'm going to lay in bed. I'm going to worry about a comet coming. Every day there's another catastrophe about to happen. There'll be a new Yucatan. China buys Sheraton Westin hotels. There's nothing I could say about that won't be construed as racist. Well, what can I say? What joke can I tell you? China buys Sheraton and Westin hotels. Anything I would say that they'll jump down my throat as being racist. No, I don't like China buying farmland. No, an insane nation lets China buy farmland. An insane nation lets China buy our infrastructure after sucking us dry industrially. A bunch of sellout prostitutes in Congress let this happen. You wonder why there's a revolution going on in the ballot box. You've seen nothing. If they deny Trump the nomination, there'll be riots in the streets. Never mind what the left is going to do. There may not be. I don't know. There could be nothing. They could all go home. Who knows what they'll do? Nor do I encourage any kind of violence. As you well know, I'm a man of peace. I'm merely a talk show host. Social Security Administration beneficiaries top 60 million. We covered that. Soon it'll be 100 million people with two leeches for every one worker. That's all. What else? We covered the woman leading the combat command who never flew an airplane in combat. Classic affirmative action. You talk about disrespect for reality. Now, I want to talk again. I'm going to stick to my topic. Conservative Moranos. It's a new phrase, I admit. I've used it once or twice before, but it's becoming increasingly important for you to understand. If you're a conservative in a liberal industry, you're never going to discuss your politics, because if you do, you get demoted, you don't get promoted, you get ostracized and picked on by the other chickens in the chicken coop. That's how it works. They peck you to death like nasty bully school children who picked on a kid who might have been slightly effeminate, for example, if he was a boy, or picked on a girl who was a tomboy. That's what chickens do in a chicken coop. Any chicken that's slightly different, they'll peck it to death. You know that if you're a weirdo. I told you I have a sign on my wall. I was weird before weird was cool. I was always an oddball, even as a child. They didn't know exactly why I'm still considered to be odd, even in the media. I'm an oddball. After 29 books and 22 years on radio, you see an article about top conservatives, and I'm not mentioned. Breitbart leaves me out every time. Why? Because they're run by a bunch of cranky crackpots who are jealous of me. They all wanted to be on radio. They're not serious, they go on. You hear? A following of 1,200 people. 1,200 people a week listen to the Sirius XM, a conservative show. But that's the way it is. The jealousy is pretty strong. The jihadi they caught there in Brussels, what did they do? Give him welfare? Ask him what they do to make him, to radicalize him? ISIS jihadi behind Paris attacks captured alive. Well, they ask him what they did wrong, why he became radicalized, what could they have done. The EU, that's what they would do. Mr. Jihadis, there's something we could have done differently that would have had you not shoot people alive with a machine gun? Ugh. Well, there is a solution to this problem. Turn the borders, build walls, turn them back, and start deportation proceedings immediately, first with the prisoners. You take all of the radical Muslims in prison in Europe and throw them out of the country in a mass deportation and put them back in their homeland countries. That's number one. Then you start with that. You can't even argue with those things. Start with close the borders, deport those in prison who are jihadists, don't keep them in your country, and then start deportation proceedings against those who are cashing in on welfare, for example, or fraud. Throw them out. Then you'll save your nation. Same applies here. Same exact rules apply. That's why there's an election going on. Now, I'm getting a lot of calls on this subject. Here's one. KSFO, John, welcome to the program. John, what's on your mind? What's your topic?
Hi, Michael. I happen to be in the film and television business, and I got to tell you, in the twilight of my career now, I used to have to hide the fact that I was conservative. If you announced it, if they knew you were, you just wouldn't work, period.
What about now that you're an older man? Do you tell them?
Yeah. Now I tell them. Now I proudly tell them. Now I get in their face. And, okay, I lose a little work, but I'd rather lose the work and fade off into the sunset having said my piece.
I know. It's better late than never, in other words. You're getting it off your chest. You're tired of being repressed like a Morano in Portugal.
Beaten down. Tired of feeling like I'm somehow the weird guy.
Yeah, like in other words, you love the country, and there's something wrong with you all these years in the film business.
Absolutely.
Why do they hate America? What is it about them, John? Give me the zeitgeist of their mentality.
Money. That's the bottom line.
But wait, okay, so they're into money. I get it. It's a business. So how do liberal politics play into that?
They feel that if the more liberal they are, the more how they can outdo one another, the better they feel about themselves, the better they can present themselves to the world, to society at large. Doesn't no one takes into consideration what they do in their personal lives, how they treat people in their personal lives, how they berate people in their personal lives, what kind of literal limousine liberals they truly are. That's never taken into consideration.
Well, how do they explain the popularity of Christian-based films, which is not an anomaly anymore? Every time there's either a patriotic movie, such as the one about American Sniper, which I loved, they do phenomenally. How do they not understand that the American people don't want liberal movies?
That's an interesting question. I recently worked on, for the first time, a faith-based movie, and I was surprised that it actually got funded. Now, it didn't get a lot of money by comparison, and it hasn't been released yet, but having said that, this upsets the apple cart completely.
Yeah, but look at Mel Gibson's movie. Remember The Passions of Christ that Mel Gibson did and how big a hit it was?
Yes.
There's a huge audience for this kind of movie. How could the Caesars of Hollywood, who are into the bottom line, not understand the American people are sick and tired of their filth? They're sick and tired of the cesspool and the filth that they put out. The Harvey Weinsteins every day pumping out violence and filth onto the American and the world landscape. Don't they understand that the people hate them?
No, they don't. And that's...
No, so they live in an insular world. They don't care about the unwashed, idiotic Christians out there who put them down. Is that it?
Absolutely correct.
So everything is gay, lesbians, transgender, and global warming to them. Is that it?
Absolutely correct. And I can feel good about myself because now I have a cause. Whether it's global warming, whether it's gay rights, it doesn't matter. I have a cause, and I feel good about myself, and I can present myself as being better than you, better than...
I see. It's a holier than thou, more progressive than thou.
Absolutely correct. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of lives they really lead. I
don't really care about the lives they lead. I care about the products they create. What type of... what do you do in the film business?
Well, let's just say I'm in the Directors Guild of America. So,
if you were casting me in a movie, what part would I play?
Interesting you should say that. By the way, Michael, I was your absolute very first caller in your career all those years ago.
What, 1994?
That's right, and when you were on a letter station, and I was
I was on KGO overnight show, did a show on affirmative action. I received more hatred than I ever have in my whole life that one night.
And I'm listening to this guy, and I say, oh, my God, and I couldn't stop listening. So I go...
Now, wait a minute. Do you live in Pacifica? Are you the guy who once invited me to an Academy Awards party at your house in a big mansion in Pacifica?
No, I don't live in any big mansion. No, that was...
Oh, I lost touch with him. He was a great guy. He lived in this big mansion in Pacifica, Italian guy, and in his basement of this mansion, he recreated the kitchen of his childhood in the Bronx with a small kitchen table and a check tablecloth where he chose to sit and eat his meals. It was interesting.
So I think I would cast you as a Secretary of State.
Oh, yeah. Under Donald Trump, would we have fun?
Oh, speaking of which, if I even mention his name on a set.
Oh, I could just imagine what would Sean Penn do? That peace-loving actor. Sean Penn, I imagine what he would do if you ever mentioned Donald Trump around him.
Well, I've worked with the guy, and, I don't want to get sued, so
That says it all. That's like I've heard the same stories from everyone who's been around him. He's a real piece of work, and yet he professes this love and peace and for the minority and the downtrodden. It's very much like Leon DiCaprio talking about global warming and then jetting off to a yacht.
No, I love this. I work with guys who send their kids off to shrinks in limousines. So, go figure that. Truly
I could just know what my father would have told me if I had some mental issues at the time. It wouldn't have been a limousine. First of all, he couldn't have afforded it. He would have told me to go get a job washing dishes for a few weeks. It would straighten me out, whatever's wrong with me. Just putting your hand in greasy hot water every night for 5 hours is good for what ails you, is what he would have told me. All right, my friend, thank you very much for sharing with us your stories of a Marrano conservative in the film world. What a great call that was. Oh, wait, is he still there? Did he hang up? I hung up because I wanted to send him government zero. Paper says Hillary, and he's still, send him government zero. Hillary and NSA battle brewing. This is from the Drudge Report. The FBI has been investigating Clinton for months, but an even more secretive federal agency has its own important beef with her. Yeah, right. Sure. Absolutely. Dark cloud over her presidential campaign. Emailgate is not going away. The scandal has gotten worse, with never-ending revelations of apparent misconduct by Ms. Clinton and her staff. Specifically FBI, provisions of the Espionage Act. Why don't we hear anything about this from Jake Tapper? How come Jake never asks her this question? The little boy Jake Tapper, the good little boy. Jake Tapper reminds me of the kind of kid who did everything his mommy told him to do and got rewarded with M&Ms. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Hey, our Savage Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust for wealth insurance, gold and silver. Call 800-BUICOIN. The email gate of Hillary Clinton is about to blow up, and if the stooge in the Attorney General's office does not act on the FBI's desire for her to act, there are stories coming out that the FBI and their agents who've worked so hard to show what Hillary has done and the people she's put in danger, they're going to start leaking to the press, greatly embarrassing Hillary Clinton. One way or the other, we're going to find out. What you have to know is this. What is this really all about? Hillary went into SCIF's, SCIF, Secure Compartment Information Facility, which is required for handling any top secret plus information. And what happened here is she didn't understand this. Is that all of us should understand that our cell phone, BlackBerries are antiquated, but your BlackBerry, your cell phone, they cannot be brought into a SCIF. And the reason for that is, as written, your smartphone is a sophisticated surveillance device on you, the user, that also happens to provide phone and internet access. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? If you have a handheld device, agencies or individuals can take remote control over your handheld device without you knowing it and record your conversations. They said it's surprisingly easy to do so for any competent spy service. So we all know this now, but Hillary should have known that. And so her emails were being picked up, likely picked up, by foreigners, by spies, and used against America. We don't know how many people have suffered, been outed, or absolutely murdered or tortured because of the sloppiness of her and her coterie of followers. And that's really the basis of it. And then they mentioned Sid Blumenthal again. These classified emails, Sid Blumenthal keeps coming up. And this is important for you to understand, because Clinton did not want to check up, did not want to leave her BlackBerry behind. She did not want to sit down at a computer terminal. She was too good for that. And when Team Clinton kept pressing the point, quote, we were politely told to shut up and color in our coloring books. This is what she did. This is how they acted. And as you well know, there was an adage from World War II, loose lips sink ships. We don't know how many ships have been sunk. We don't know how far our enemies have gotten into our military. But I really don't think that's as big a point as what Obama is doing to our military, even just now. Taking an affirmative action woman making her a general, and then taking what is a glorified air traffic controller and putting her in charge of all combat aircraft in the United States of America. It's a disgrace. It's the first time in history that a non-pilot has been put in that position. Have a nice day.